Have you ever felt like you're living your life on someone else's stage, reciting lines you didn't write? In a play you didn't audition for? You crave freedom, peace, and confidence. But every step you take feels filtered through invisible expectations. You edit yourself before speaking. You shrink your truth to fit the comfort of others. You wear masks, not because they protect you, but because you're afraid to be seen without them. And yet, why? Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, asked this nearly 2,000 years ago. We love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinions than our own. That haunting truth echoes louder today than ever before. We haven't broken free. We've just modernized the chains. Main content begins. Look around. We say we want authenticity, but we spend our days curating versions of ourselves just to fit in. We second-guess what we say before it leaves our mouths. We dress to impress people we secretly resent. We shape entire lifestyles based on opinions that shift like weather, fleeting, chaotic, and mostly irrelevant. The Stoics weren't immune to this. They too felt the pull of approval and the sting of ridicule. But what makes their wisdom so timeless is that they didn't retreat from society. They trained themselves to walk through it without being ruled by it. And that's exactly what this video is about. If you've ever shrunk yourself just to avoid judgment, if you've held your tongue to protect fragile egos, if you've played small so others wouldn't feel threatened, then let this be your wake-up call. Your permission slip. Your quiet revolution. Because today, we're diving into 12 Stoic street strategies to stop caring about what doesn't matter and start living unshaken. If you're tired of letting other people's opinions steer your life, you're not alone and you're in the right place. Before we get into it, just know this. If you value ideas that challenge conventional thinking, if you're here not just to feel good, but to get better, there's a simple, free way to support what we're doing. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know, and it tells the algorithm that you're ready for more than fluff. The reality we inherit. Let's be brutally honest, most of us live on autopilot. We follow rules we never questioned. We chase goals handed down like family heirlooms. We perform rituals that lost meaning decades ago. Ever wondered where it all came from? We live by codes, traditions, appearances, reputations, all inherited like hand-me-down clothes. But how often do we pause and ask, who decided this? And why am I still obeying it? That's exactly the kind of radical honesty the Stoics loved. They weren't afraid to look foolish if it meant they were free. And no one embodied that spirit more than Diogenes the Cynic. The power of nonconformity. Now, Diogenes wasn't your average philosopher. He didn't write long essays or sit in ivory towers. No, he lived in a barrel. He walked backward into public squares. He begged from statues. He mocked customs, but not for rebellion's sake. He wasn't looking for chaos. He was looking for mastery over himself. His mission? To train his mind to stop needing approval. To prove that dignity doesn't come from applause, it comes from alignment. From standing in who you are with no need for permission. You don't have to be extreme to apply this. You don't need to live in a barrel or reject society. You can start small. Say one honest thing, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Wear something that reflects you, not what's expected. Let your true voice slip past the filter just once and see what happens. Here's what you'll likely find. The fear of judgment is louder than the judgment itself. Once you push past the noise, you realize most people are too busy judging themselves to truly focus on you. Self-examination, the core of Stoic growth. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And a major part of that examination? Uncovering the silent scripts that rule our daily choices. Ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? And more importantly, who are you pretending to be when they are? The Stoics believed that living for the crowd's approval is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. Their remedy wasn't rebellion, it was practiced indifference, a cultivated resistance to both flattery and ridicule, because both are traps. Carl Jung said it in modern terms. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that kind of authenticity isn't passive. It doesn't arrive just because you want it. You earn it. You fight for it. You walk backwards into a crowd, metaphorically, or not just to prove to yourself the world won't collapse if you stop performing. And once you feel that little moment of liberation, you start to crave more of it. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. The gift of discomfort. There's something strangely powerful about choosing discomfort on purpose. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because you're trying to train something deeper. Your mental resilience, your emotional stamina. Most of us avoid discomfort like it's a virus. We edit our words. We hide our real opinions. We follow trends we don't even like. All because we want to stay invisible. All to avoid the sting of being seen and possibly judged. But here's the Stoic truth. If you're afraid of judgment, you'll always be controlled by it. Cato's example of unshaken resolve. Take Cato the Younger, a Roman senator, a Stoic titan. When everyone around him wore lavish purple robes to project power and status, Cato wore plain black. He walked barefoot in the streets. He slept on the ground while others reclined on silks. Why? Because he wanted to train himself to be unshaken, not only in luxury, but in hardship. He wanted his soul to be immovable. And when the Roman Republic crumbled under tyranny, it was Cato who stood tall, unbending, when others sold their values for comfort. That's the kind of strength the Stoics sought. Not strength of appearance, but strength of character. Not loud, flashy rebellion, but quiet, grounded conviction. And the best part? You don't need to be born a Stoic to start thinking like one. In a time when crisp white togas were the symbol of elegance and conformity, Cato walked defiantly in dark, rough-spun garments. No tunic, no shoes. Not because he was poor, not because he couldn't afford better, but because he chose discomfort. He invited the stares. He welcomed the whispered remarks. Why? Because he understood something timeless. If you can face small judgments with your head held high, you'll be unshaken when the bigger ones arrive. Cato believed that resilience was forged in public by looking foolish and surviving it. If you could endure people laughing at your clothes, mocking your lifestyle, or misjudging your intent, then their words would lose their power. You wouldn't just be tolerating criticism, you'd be immune to it. That's the core of Stoic strength. Not a shield that hides you from the world, but a rooted stillness that lets you walk through it untouched. It's not about building wall sits, about building resilience. Plato once wrote, "We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light." And what is that light? It's being fully seen, fully yourself. No filter, no mask, no performance. But to stand in that light, you have to first be willing to look different, to risk being misunderstood, to be ridiculed and keep standing anyway. Psychologist Carl Jung once described shame as a soul-eating emotion. And he was right. It creeps in quietly, whispering that you're too loud, too strange, too opinionated, too you. It silences you when you most need to speak. It keeps you still when every part of you wants to move. But here's the thing. You don't need to be Cato, walking barefoot through ancient Rome, to push back. You can start with something small. Post a thought that's honest, not popular. Admit you don't know something, especially when others pretend they do. Ask the so-called dumb question in the meeting. Wear what you like, not what's trending. One small act of authenticity can start to dissolve years of self-editing. Socrates, perhaps the most infamous question asker in history, was known for walking barefoot and posing questions that made people squirm. He didn't do it to be provocative. He did it to seek the truth. Because truth doesn't live in comfort, it lives on the edge where growth begins. And growth always waits just beyond your comfort zone. Every time you allow yourself to be seen awkward, weird, unpolished, you reclaim a little more of your freedom. And when you stop needing to be liked by everyone, you unlock the ability to truly be yourself. Will everyone agree with you? Number, will everyone understand you? Definitely not. But the ones who do, they'll respect the real you, not the curated version edited for mass approval. There's a funny illusion we all seem to carry. Like we're on some giant stage, spotlights glaring, every step and stumble closely watched and judged by a million unseen eyes. We obsess over every misstep, every stain on our shirt, every crack in our voice. But here's the liberating truth. Most people aren't watching. They're too busy performing in their own imaginary spotlight to focus on yours. Once you realize this, it feels obvious. But living it? That takes deliberate practice. That's why the Stoics trained themselves to seek out small embarrassments. Not to suffer, but to grow. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, once walked through the busy Athenian marketplace carrying a pot of lentil soup. Not impressive, not dignified, just a quiet, humble act. But his teacher suddenly smashed the pot soup, splashing everywhere, covering Zeno in mess and shame. He froze. The crowd stared, laughed, whispered. But his teacher simply smiled and said, "See? Nobody cares." It was a brutal lesson, but a freeing one. That moment wasn't about humiliation. It was about perspective. It shattered the illusion that people are fixated on you. It showed that the fear of embarrassment often weighs more than the moment itself. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." So if what we repeatedly do is seek approval, hide our truth, and obsess over image, then we become performers, not people. We become more concerned with performance than with purpose. The Stoics pushed back against that mindset. They deliberately exposed themselves to small discomforts, not because they enjoyed it, but because they understood a deep truth. If you face the fear of judgment head-on, you discover it's mostly smoke and mirrors. Carl Jung said something profound. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, many of our anxieties come from all the effort we put into avoiding discomfort, especially social discomfort. We silence ourselves, we shrink, we pretend just to avoid the feeling of being seen too clearly. But what if we stopped running from that feeling? What if we leaned into it? What if we embraced discomfort not as punishment, but as practice? Socrates was not beloved in his time. He was mocked, criticized, eventually executed not for crimes, but for asking inconvenient questions, for refusing to conform. But he understood this. Truth demands courage. And courage begins the moment you realize the world doesn't revolve around you. Not in a harsh way, but in a freeing one. And that realization changes everything. Because once you understand that people aren't scrutinizing you the way you imagined, they're too caught up in their own lives, their own insecurities, you begin to reclaim something precious. Your freedom. Freedom to take risks. Freedom to learn out loud. Freedom to stumble, to fall, to get back up, and grow without the crushing weight of shame. So many of us stay paralyzed, frozen by the fear of looking foolish. But here's the paradox: this fear doesn't protect us. It weakens us. It makes us fragile, hesitant, and constantly anxious. We begin performing our lives like actors on a stage, chasing applause that may never come. And all the while, we lose touch with what it means to live honestly, fully, and courageously. But when you truly grasp deep down that the world isn't fixated on your every move, something profound happens. You loosen your grip, you begin to breathe. You start to move through life with a new kind of grace and boldness. That's where the Stoics took root, right in the heart of that freedom. Plato once said, "Knowledge begins in wonder, but wonder only flourishes in vulnerability." You can't ask real questions, can't challenge old beliefs if you're too afraid to be seen as naive. You can't grow when you're enslaved by the image you think you need to maintain. The Stoics understood this. That's why they didn't just preach detachment from wealth or possessions, they practiced detachment from reputation itself. Somewhere along the line, many of us were quietly taught that being different was dangerous, that it was something to hide. So we learned to round off our edges, to silence our boldness, to walk the safe path even when it felt like a betrayal. But think about it. The very qualities you admire in others, originality, courage, authenticity, those only exist because someone dared to stand apart. The Stoics didn't theorize this, they embodied it. Look at Agrippinus, the Roman philosopher who lived under Nero's brutal regime. While others bowed or conformed to survive, he remained calm, steady, and defiantly true to himself. He once said, "I am the red thread in a white tunic." He didn't flinch at standing out. He welcomed it. For Agrippinus, individuality wasn't rebellion. It was character in motion. And in today's world where trends dictate behavior, where likes define worth, authenticity has become a rare and radical power. Your unique story, your lived experience, your quirks, these aren't burdens to carry. They are your strength. They are your edge. And yet, we often trade them in for social currency, thinking it will buy us peace. But what we get in return is far too costly. A slow erosion of identity. Carl Jung captured this truth when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Not a safer version, not a filtered copy. The full, vibrant, sometimes messy you. But becoming that version of yourself demands something: discomfort. You will be misunderstood. You will be laughed at. You will be judged. And the Stoics would say, good. That discomfort? That's proof you're not blending into the noise. It's confirmation that you're standing firm in something real. Socrates lived this idea to the end. He questioned what others blindly accepted. Not because he wanted to stir trouble, but because he refused to live a lie. He saw the danger in a life shaped by silence and conformity. He believed that a life worth living must answer to truth, not to popularity. So let me say this plainly. Your weirdness isn't a weakness. Your past isn't a problem. Your vision, your values, your voice, those are your fingerprint on the world. If you silence them just to fit in, you lose more than identity. You lose meaning. You become forgettable in a world that desperately needs people who stand out. But sometimes, the loudest critics aren't strangers. They're people close to us: family, friends, teachers, mentors. People who love us, but don't quite understand the path we're walking. And that might be the hardest challenge of all. Choosing between the life others expect you to live and the one you feel deeply called to create. Florence Nightingale knew that tension all too well. Born into wealth and high society, she was expected to live quietly, to marry well, and certainly not to get her hands dirty with work, especially not nursing, which was seen as disgraceful at the time. But something in her refused to be silenced. A voice within her kept whispering, maybe even shouting toward a greater purpose, a call to heal, to serve, to lead. Eventually, she faced the question that haunts us all. Will you let their opinions stop you from becoming who you were meant to be? And that's not just her story. That's our story too. Because whether we see it or not, most of us carry invisible chains made not of steel, but of expectations, fears, and inherited guilt. The question is, will you wear those chains quietly, or will you learn to break them? We ended the last section with a hard truth. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones whose expectations become the heaviest chains. And yet, the real battle often begins within the moment we fear disappointing those we love more than disappointing ourselves. So we play it safe. We stay silent when we should speak up. We choose the secure job over the meaningful one. We rehearse our words, say what others want to hear, and chase approval instead of chasing truth. But as the Stoics so often reminded us, what good is comfort if it costs you your soul? Epictetus didn't mince words. If you want to improve, he said, you must be willing to be misunderstood. And he wasn't just referring to strangers online or critics in the crowd. He meant the people you care about, the ones you desperately hope will understand. But growth Real growth often comes wrapped in friction. Art, not because you're looking for a fight, but because you're learning to shed the parts of the world that no longer serve your journey. Carl Jung captured this quiet tragedy with brutal honesty. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. And too often, that's exactly what we carry. Not our dreams, but theirs. Not our path, but the one handed to us with good intentions, but heavy expectations. And while those dreams may have been built from love, they still aren't ours. You get one life, just one. And you can't live it fully while dragging someone else's blueprint behind you like a ghost. Socrates warned about living the unexamined life, but examining your life doesn't stop at asking deep questions. It requires hard, sometimes painful decisions. It demands brutal honesty about what you truly want and what you're willing to sacrifice for it. Because walking your own path, that might upset people. It might confuse them. It might even hurt them. But denying your own truth, burying your dreams under layers of approval, that hurts you more. Quietly, slowly, deeply. There is a kind of peace, a strange calm, that begins the moment you stop trying to control what was never in your control to begin with. Most people spend their lives waiting for permission, waiting for applause, before they believe in themselves. But living that way, it's dangerous. Because if your self-worth is tied to public reaction, then you're always one opinion away from collapse. The Stoics knew that trap well. In fact, they built an entire philosophy around escaping it. Their advice was simple, yet profound. Focus only on what is up to you. Let go of the rest. You can control your choices, your effort, your integrity. That's your realm. But you can't control how others interpret those choices. You can't control the algorithm. You can't force people to understand your message. And truly, that's not your job. Aristotle put it beautifully. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. In other words, don't aim for applause, aim for consistency. Show up. Do the work. Especially when no one is watching. Especially when the results are slow to arrive. Carl Jung echoed this in another way. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. If you're always looking outward toward likes, followers, approval, you'll lose sight of the one thing that matters most. The work itself, the act of showing up, the discipline of creating, the integrity of staying true. Socrates believed that virtue is its own reward. And he was right. When you give your best with honesty and heart, you've already won. The applause is background noise. The process is everything. Still, it's strange, isn't it? How one careless comment can derail an entire day. One passive-aggressive jab, one offhand insult, and suddenly your mind spirals. You replay the moment. You wonder what you did wrong. You wonder how to fix it. But here's the deeper question. Who exactly is this person you're giving so much mental power to? The Stoics had a rule. Don't accept others' judgments blindly. Pause. Investigate. Ask, does this opinion even hold value? Marcus Aurelius advised himself. Get inside the mind of the one who criticizes you. What are their values? What do they believe in? And often, you'll find their judgment reveals more about them than it does about you. Plato once said, opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance. And let's be honest, most criticism lives in that vague, blurry middle. It's loud, it's uncertain, and it's often completely unqualified. So why are we taking it so seriously? Would you take medical advice from someone who's never studied medicine? Would you let someone who's never built anything destroy what you've worked years to create? With just a flippant opinion? Carl Jung offered another insight. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That includes our sensitivity to criticism. Sometimes, we react so intensely, not because the judgment is true, but because we haven't yet built the inner clarity to ignore it. Socrates believed that true wisdom begins with knowing what you don't know. And perhaps part of that wisdom is recognizing when an insult is just noise. And that also means knowing who doesn't deserve a seat at the table of your self-worth. Not all feedback is equal. Not all opinions carry weight. Your job isn't to please everyone. It's to discern which voices are worth your attention and which ones are better left in silence. We spend so much of our time trying to matter, trying to leave a mark, be remembered, stay relevant. But take a step back, zoom out for a moment. 100 years from now, will anyone even remember what you posted today? Or how many followers you had this month? Probably not. And if they do, will it matter to you by then? These signals feel big in the moment, but they're hollow if we make them the goal. The Stoics warned against this illusion. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about praise, reminding himself that it's fleeting and shallow. He said it's not the sound of clapping that should matter, it's whether the act was just, honest, and rooted in virtue. That's the real reward. Socrates challenged people not only to seek truth, but to detach from approval. He didn't bend to the crowd. He focused on the questions that stirred the soul, not the ones that pleased the audience. And for that, he was mocked, but also for they've endured. Aristotle believed that excellence is a habit, not an outcome. It's in the doing, the effort, the craftsmanship, not in the performance metrics or the praise that follows. So here's the reminder. Build something that lasts not, something that just trends. Pour your energy into the work itself, not the reaction to it. Respect the process, refine your craft, and let the applause fade into the background. That's where true impact begins.